Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to Fear It Goes. Today, we are talking about a pretty heavy topic, but honestly, I think this is one very, very near and dear to many hearts. So today, we're talking about grief, and we're talking about how to manage grief, how to work through grief in the most productive and healthy ways. When we lose a loved one in an instant, when we have experiences of long, drawn-out, slow deaths. When people leave us because of a mass shooting. Whatever the scenario is, death is not easy. So today we're going to talk about how to work through death in ways that we can see the gifts within it. I know that sounds so crazy because it seems like there's never a gift in someone leaving us. It seems like there is never going to be a time when we can just appreciate what we had and not miss what we don't. Today we're going to talk about that. Today's guest is Corey Sirota. With a master's degree in social work and practicing as a psychotherapist, Corey is one of the top leading experts in her field. She has a private practice that specializes in loss and bereavement, stress management, and relationship issues. She's the author of Someone Died, Now What? A personal and professional perspective on coping with grief and loss. She's done TED Talks, she speaks internationally, and she is the co-host of a weekly radio talk show called Life Unrehearsed on CJAD 800. She is a remarkable woman, and I am so very privileged to bring her to you. So with no further ado, I want to welcome Corey to Fear It Goes. Welcome to Fear It Goes, the podcast all about taking your fears with you and doing it anyway. I'm your host, Brandy Taylor. Hi, Corey. It's such a pleasure to have you here on Fear It Goes. Thank you so much for joining us and bringing such beautiful insight and expertise into our community.
I am so happy that you invited me to do so. I love this opportunity, and so I welcome it all the time and excited to be here.
Oh, love it, love it, love it. We were just discussing forgiveness because this is what I was just writing about is forgiveness and gratitude and how this kind of correlates with grief and the things that we experience through grief and the ways that emotions tie in and the releasing of emotions. So I actually just kind of want to repeat what we were just saying because it was really good.
Yeah.
So we're talking about perception and emotions that are tied into our perception and how it's so easy for someone from the outside to see these things. That's why mentors, coaches, therapists, all these great guides are here to help and can see the big picture. Whereas often when we're so tied into the emotion, we can't see the picture at all. We just see our little piece of, and we hold tight to that.
Well, that's it. It's what I'm thinking. I don't want to let go of that, and it also contributes to the whole concept of grief and letting go, which is also a fascinating topic about why do we hold on? Why is it so difficult to let go? There's a fear of letting go. That whole piece around. Well, if I let go, what does that mean? What does that mean about me? What does that say about me? Does it mean I never really cared about the person? Because now I'm moving forward, and there's a great TED Talk about people moving forward versus moving on. We do move forward. We don't move on.
I would agree. Life, the interesting thing that I found, so I was saying I really experienced grief for the first time in my life to the magnitude I did when my dog died. And yes, it seems so different because it's a dog, it's a pet, but she was really like our first kid. And I will never forget the thought going through my head of, I can't believe the world just continues on and she's gone. Mm-hmm. Like the irrational thoughts that go through your head, but we forget that life is moving. It's always it's always fluid and moving around us. It doesn't stop because we
Well,
feel stuck,
the only constant is change, right?
right?
So I'm going to sort of point out that I believe that much of our behavior is related to loss and a lot of non-death losses. So even though I'm not taking away from that it was a significant point in time when your dog died, but you have had losses all your life. They just haven't been death losses.
That's an interesting idea. I can't wait to dig into this.
So looking at that, and in fact, that's part of where we don't recognize and we don't treat them as if a loss. So we don't know, why am I acting like this?
Right.
Nobody died. Well, but yeah, something changed. Unwelcome change happened. And so we need to grieve that. We need to acknowledge it and we need to grieve that. That's one piece. And when we don't do our grief work, it comes up all over the time, all over the place, all the time. By the way,
lots of awesome ways. Life presents for you. It's always presenting for you. So let's talk about that. I hadn't really thought of that when we were talking about grief originally and loss. Of course, people experience loss when they leave a career, when the kids leave the house.
Any transition.
Yes.
Any transition, changing countries, changing jobs, transition from adolescent schools, vocations for sure. We talked about loss of, I see anxiety and stress. So stress, loss of control.
Oh, that's a good one. Because we are always trying to control the outcome, which is kind of crazy.
Well, good luck with that. Like I always sort of tell people, how's that working for you, you know?
Right. Oh, trying to control the outcome is I can't say it's impossible, but it's a lot of forced energy when we are trying to control the outcome instead of allowing it to develop into what it's supposed to be. And we can guide it.
Right.
And discover the journey along the way is absolutely incredible.
Right.
But to force an outcome often causes so much conflict within
because
and outside.
You can't control it any more than you can control the weather.
Right. But why can't we?
Well, I know, but I mean, my goodness.
I want it to be sunny today, damn it.
Yeah, we would. But what we can control is around it is if I don't like living in a climate that has very cold weather, then I can make the decision to move, but I can't control that whether it's going to snow or not. Or I can control whether I put on a jacket, go out or don't go out. But and it's funny. So we use the weather analogy, but that's life in general. That's life and death and loss in general. We spend so much energy and time trying to put things in boxes and places and spaces and situations, and then we're angry because they don't work the way that we would like to. We would like them to.
Right.
And now can I go back to something else?
Yes, please.
I also want to talk about, there were two things when you said about your dog. I think that also as a society, we also put certain circumstances and beliefs in silos and boxes and hierarchies. Right. And I will say as part of you, I've talked with you prior to this about different aspects of grief and why for someone like you was your dog any less valuable or any less significant. So it's not about who died, it's about the significance in the relationship to who died, because I've had families where they had no immediate family, were not the people they were sad, but then there's someone in their lives who was a mentor or an example I use around the pet is I had a client whose their dog died, and they said, why did I cry more when my dog died than when my grandmother died? I said, well, talk about, first I said, well, did you like your grandmother?
How close were you?
No. And then I said, no, tell me about the relationship. She said, well, my grandmother lived out of town. We didn't speak very often, and I saw her even less. But my dog, Bruno was there when I got married. Bruno was there when I had my first baby. Bruno was there when I got divorced. Bruno was always there. So the meaning of the relationship, not about who it is. And we judge all the time. People judge about why should you be that sad? What's wrong with you? Or even we judge ourselves. Why, it's never only a dog. And I'm not a dog person, and I know it's never only a dog.
It's so great that you just said that, because I hadn't even thought I talked about judgment, I think actually last week on the podcast. And I talked about judgment from so many different spaces that we judge ourselves and judge other people. I had never thought at all of the way that we pass judgment sometimes on significance or meaning or brushing or trying to downgrade that for the purpose of what? My dog was amazing. She was, can't believe we're talking about this, but it's really funny. She was amazing. She was like a completely crazy spirit in this little fuzzy body. And in the end, she was suffering so much. It was absolutely time to say goodbye. And it was so difficult to say oh, it's making me choke up.
Of course. So then who am I? Who's anybody to put a value on that? Shame on them. And I in my book, Someone Died Now What, I have a chapter called Stop Being Should On.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah. We spend a lot of time telling other people what they should do and judging for them. And the truth is, it's kind of like crabs in a bucket. You know, when there's a bucket of crabs, one tries to crawl out, they pull that, the other crabs will pull that bucket, that crab, that one that's trying to leave out back then, because people don't want to be different and alone, and so and want you to be on their team and their side. And so let's say I hear all the time, oh gosh, I don't go to the cemetery, I'm really bad, I really should have gone to the cemetery. Well, if the cemetery is not the place that resonates with you, why is that wrong? If somebody else, or you go all the time, someone says, well, why do you go all the time? That's probably coming from their own issue around the fact that they don't go.
Right. And honestly, I think like a location doesn't matter. It's what you're carrying with you. And this is the point I got to going through the stages of grief. And we'll talk about the stages of grief in a sec. But when I finally kind of came to the other side of grief and I went through my stages, it wasn't that I got over her death. I don't think you ever get over a death. I think you move through it and then you find the appreciation on the other side. As much as, this still chokes me up a little, like I miss her. She was awesome. She was crazy, just the right kind of crazy. Perfect for me. But she gave me such a gift in the time that she was with us. You know, like I look back on all these memories with her with so much laughter and joy. And even when she was just being a total little bugger, they make me laugh. And I love that I still get to carry that with me for the rest of my life. No matter what, she will always be with me for the rest of my life.
That's right. So I definitely don't get over it. And again, first chapter, get over it and other stupid things people say. Because I literally collect the things that are astounding. And I know, by the way, for anybody who I might have said it, you might have said it, whoever's listening, we say it from a good place. That
of course.
And we get nobody. The intention is not to be harmful, but before you say something, stop and think about how that might sound to the person who is grieving. Because what often you're trying to do is make it better.
Right. Often we're trying to make it better, so we say things that don't make anything better. Sometimes we just need to sit there and be quiet.
That's it. Just be.
Just listen. Just hug them, give them what they need in that moment. But it's not about us feeling uncomfortable with their pain. It's about them just needing to express or be loved in the moment where they feel that loss. Right?
Yeah. And not trying to fix it.
It's so hard for fixers.
Yes. And that's the challenge but even sometimes, and we all do it quite often, is we match stories. Like, oh, you're done. Well, sometimes we have to wait and see, like, do you want me to match that story? Because now it's becoming about me and not about you.
I don't think it's that we're trying to match a story, because I've done that before too. And it's interesting that you say this, because I hadn't thought of that. It's not that I'm trying to match the story. It's that I'm trying to say, I know where you're at, right? And I know what this is like. And it's really shitty. And instead of saying, I know where you're at, I know what this is like, and this is really shitty, I'm here for you, I give you my story, right? And I think that's what we're doing in that moment, is we're just offering that we've been here too, but we do it in a way that may not come across exactly, may not come across in the way that we want it to. See,
So this
that's
is now,
that that's
now
that
it's what
whole non-malicious, right?
right. No, no, the not a lot called the umbrella of care that we have, that we just want it, we want to be helpful. And one of the first things I'll say to any client that I'm working with is that I don't have the answers and I can't fix it, but I can accompany you through the process.
That's beautiful. I can support you
Yeah,
and hold that space for you
yeah.
because you need it.
Until you're ready to because I hold the hope until they're
Right.
ready to see it, because that you say, like, how do you manage it in all of this? And you mentioned stages, and while there's lots of literature out there, starting with our most well-known Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and to Therese Rando and John William Ward, they all, one talks about phases, the other talks about the tasks, the other talks about the processes, and they're all good and they're all true on one level.
Right.
The problem is that we don't pass through these phases or stages or in one nice, neat little fashion.
And you might bounce back and forth between them.
Well, that's it. I actually
yes.
have this. I don't know if you can see this. Are you able to see this?
Grief. Yeah, I can see that. Sorry, you guys can't see that because we're on video, but you're not.
Visualize a process of a you, and starting with shock and denial and disbelief, going all the way through a whole host of emotions, culminating in acceptance. Most theories will look like that, but the truth is, and the picture I show is a mishkabibbled a drawing of that, because it changes all the time and it's complicated and it's messy. And no, you're not going crazy, you're grieving. Just recognize that it is a process. That's why we go back to it. You don't get over it. You learn to live with it, and it changes all the time.
Well, and it changes aspects about you too, because there's a different appreciation that comes with the understanding of that relationship when you've moved through it.
And you mentioned earlier forgiveness.
Yep.
This whole concept of, I think there's a lot of, one of the biggest emotions I hear about is guilt.
Right.
I should have done, and if I only,
that was me.
Try and reframe. Well, what really is guilt? And what I understand about guilt is, if you know that I'm sick and you choose not to come visit me because you have something better to do or whatever,
right,
and then I die, feel guilty.
You should feel guilty. Should.
You had information, you made a decision. And
right.
Okay, I get that. But most of the time we don't know that someone is, especially with a sudden illness, right? If we had that information, of course we would have done something differently.
And even on the other side of that, okay, so we find out someone's dying and they're in the hospital and we choose not to see them. Mm-hmm. We're struggling with our own stuff inside that's stopping us from going. And then the guilt that comes from us being in a space not able to hold the space for them in their moment is crushing for us, right? That's the guilt. It's interesting because when Annabelle died, for me in the beginning, I was like, oh my God, I could have done this. I should have done that. Shouldas, right?
Right.
Because all this crazy shit goes through your head. And I will never forget, literally the second day, the first day when the vet came and put her down, I was a disaster. Couldn't stop crying. I was a mess. Then the next day, I woke up and I was like, how is the world still moving? How are things still going on around me? Because I feel like I'm complete disaster in my headspace. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting when we look at judgment, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm judging myself. This is why I feel guilty. I'm judging myself because I didn't come see you in the hospital when you were in your latter days.
But you made a choice. Understand that. And it's not necessarily, is it wrong?
It's not necessarily wrong or right.
Yeah, it's right or wrong for you. I get the question all the time. And I use this as my own barometer. I was just someone asked, should I go to a funeral? Shouldn't I go to a funeral? I said, I'm not going to give you the answers. But what I do is I say, let's say somebody has died and I don't know whether, or they're sick. If I see them, well, in the case of death, I'm not going to see them. But if I see someone who's sick in the hospital and I don't go, and I think I'm going to feel bad about it, then I guess I better go.
Right. That's a great barometer. How do I feel I am going to feel?
Yeah. When I see the family, the mourners, how am I going to feel when I run into them? Am I going to be embarrassed that I didn't do something I should have? If that's it, then I obviously feel like I need to go. But if I'm okay, and there's times where I say I'm going to be fine, and I'm going to be fine with the expectation, although it's hard not to have expectations, but with the expectation that they probably wouldn't come in circumstances if something were in my way, and I'm
Right.
okay with that. Not to say that I have any control over whether they would or wouldn't, but I can't be angry at them then, because I made
Right.
a choice. And am I okay with that? I'm okay with it. Okay. I'm not going, or I'm going.
Right. I look very much from that space for almost anything these days. How does it feel within me? Does it feel okay? Does it not feel okay? And that's a great barometer for many, many questions we ask ourselves. Should I do this? Should I not do this?
Yeah.
Should I make this change? Should I not make this change? Should I go see that person? Should I not? Should I date this person?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Be honest with yourself. Are
Yep.
you really okay with it, or are you convincing yourself that you're okay with it? Because
Right.
that will, I can't say 100%, but I would say it does help. It certainly helps me make decisions around
Helps me make decisions
action.
too.
Yeah.
And where am I making this decision from? I always look at what perspective or what lens am I wearing right now when I'm
Yeah.
looking at this choice, right?
Yeah.
How am I coming at this? Am I
Yeah.
looking at it through a very emotional standpoint, or am I looking at it through a clear lens and really assessing the situation for what it is,
Yeah.
right? Instead of what I'm trying to put on it. Oh, this person's
So,
so amazing.
lots of judgment when I work with clients who say, I can't win. I go out, if I look too happy, people say, look, she didn't even care. If I look too sad, then they're tilting their head and giving that kind of that pathetic, sympathetic look, and I don't want
Right.
that either. And so I don't know how I should be. And there's the should, and I'll tell
Right.
them that do what you need to do, as long
Be
as
you.
it's legal, immoral, or dangerous. Because according to somebody, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
So you might as well do what it is you need to do
For you.
because you will be judged. We can't avoid that. And those that do judge, well, shame on you for judging, because if you were in somebody else's shoes, you may behave a very different way, but you're not them, they're not you. So do what you need to do. And you had mentioned earlier, I thought about it, even apropos that, saying to someone, I know how you feel, is one of my big, put that X.
Yep.
Put that X there, because you don't know how anybody else feels, and it can be perceived as insensitive. You
Right.
can ask someone, help me understand how you feel.
Or I feel for you.
Or I feel that must be awful. What's
Yeah.
that like for you? But telling someone you know how they feel is, again, taking away, because you don't. Even if it's the same loss, you don't.
Right. I'm really glad we're having this conversation. It's almost like political correctness, but not at all. Like, from a very kind, loving standpoint is where we're bringing this to, right? When we're talking about death and grieving, the things that we say unintentionally can be so damaging in that moment for the person who's already in the muck.
Yeah.
And that's the last thing we ever want to give.
Right.
So it's good to come at this from a very clear perspective.
One of the most misunderstood and misunderstood for sure types of loss and death is miscarriage, stillbirth, perinatal loss.
Oh.
People really are uncomfortable, and so they say things like, at least you could get pregnant.
Oh my God, that's horrible.
You get to know the baby. At least it's God's will. Any of those? No, X. Before saying something, if you're going to say at least, don't say it. That's
good rule of thumb.
Because what you're doing is you're trying to justify for them. Right. If they say, by the way, hold on, game changer. If the bereaved person says, at least enough, fine, that's them, and that's how they want to make sense of it. But I don't want to make sense of it for them.
Because they're trying to shape it.
Yeah, that works for them. So it's not about whether you're religious or you're not religious, but it's about what does that person need to believe, and not for you to impose your beliefs on them. And I know, because religion can be a fantastic guide for someone who's going through a difficult time. And so if you are religious or spiritual, fantastic. But if they aren't and you are, not great. Not great.
Here, let
Not,
me shove that on you. What do you mean you
yeah,
don't want it?
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So the things that people say, you know, it's okay to just say I'm sorry and I'm here for you. Or people say, call me if you need me. Yeah, no, they don't call. People
because
don't
they
call.
because people go into their own little pits, right? We isolate. Often this is a natural
Mhm,
response for us when we're in grief. We
mhm.
isolate. And that's actually the last thing we need, to be honest. We
Right.
need some processing time for sure, but we also need support around us and that sense of connectedness when
Mhm.
we're in a loss.
So saying, call me if you need me, often a grieving person won't do it. So being more concrete, hey, do you need me to do a carpool? I'll pick up some food for you, or just show up with some food is a big thing. Show up with some food. They may take you up on it. They may not. The other
Right.
side of that coin is helping the griever understand they've got to ask for help, and
Right.
whether because people aren't mind readers and they don't know, do you want, do you not want, should I be there, should I not be there? So you do have to be clear, but also the point is not to be afraid to ask. What is it that would be helpful? And I'm just gonna do some things that I think might be helpful because it is such a confusing time.
I was
But
just going to say, do you think that they can really articulate when they're really in the mess of it? Do you think they can really articulate these are the things I need?
they might not be. Fair enough.
Right.
Not be so, but ask. Because people go,
Yep.
I don't know what to do. I don't know. Well, ask them. I don't know if I should say something. I don't know if I should not say something. Do we bring it up? I said, here's a novel idea. Ask them.
Or make some suggestions.
Yeah.
I would like to bring you over some meals for the week
Yeah.
because I know that this is really not what you want to be doing right now. So I do this for you?
Mhm.
I would like to give you this.
I think it goes a long way, but we are so afraid to talk about grief and loss. We
Because it makes us
even
uncomfortable.
we don't even use the words. So I have a slide that I use in my presentation. 72 euphemisms that we use instead of saying somebody died. Gone, passed away, lost, kick the bucket, pushing up
Kick the
Davy.
bucket is so insensitive.
My personal favorite, expired, as if someone
Oh,
compared to yogurt.
and you're expired.
But, yeah. So and that just talks about how uncomfortable we are with the topic. Why? Because it's unknown and it's awkward. And the more we talk about it, the
Right.
more I think the more we learn to deal with and talk about death and dying, the more we appreciate life and living.
I agree. And it's part of a cycle. It's part of a cycle. And when we look at death, I don't know, I look at the beginning of life is celebration, right? There's this whole existence in front of you. And then death is the conclusion of that existence. Well, depending on what your belief systems
But you're
are, what happens
right.
after and whatever, right? I think we're energy, so we just go back into energy, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But um it's still something to be seriously celebrated. I don't know. I look at like life as something to celebrate at any given point in the experience, whether it's the beginning, the middle, the end, somewhere in between. It's something to be celebrated. And I don't know. I don't look at death as something to be terribly mourned. You go through mourning,
Right.
absolutely. Again, that grief totally
Mhm.
hit me. Um, but it is absolutely something to be celebrated, and that's why I was saying, like, when you get to the other side, you get to appreciate all the things that life gave you.
I hope that there is. I think we talked about that the other day. Is that there are lessons to be learned
Yeah,
and from grief and loss, although it's very hard to say to someone, and maybe even disrespectful, but right out of the
in the
gate to start
moment.
talking about the lessons, I wouldn't necessarily go there.
Look at the gifts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it could be a little awkward, as you know, but I mean, I certainly have gone through such a journey myself in terms of how my losses, and I'm not sure what or how much I'm supposed to share on this.
You can share it all,
So,
baby.
I always say, what's a nice girl like me doing in a profession like this? Well, it didn't find me. I found it because I had a brother that died and he was hit by a car. It was a hit and run, and he was walking on the sidewalk, and the car went on the sidewalk and just hit him, and he died on impact. And my life changed forever. And even though I was already a social worker at the time, I decided that I knew that I didn't know how to do grief. And I started to look for resources and support, and there really wasn't a lot out there. So in my quest to create some resources and support, I came
Yeah.
across a funeral home that was starting a new program called Aftercare. And this was to help families
Excellent.
after there had been a death. You fill out government paperwork, connect them to resources, help them find clothing donations. And I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. And I
Right.
applied for the position. I got it. And I went back to school. Although I was already had a graduate degree in social work, I went back to do another certificate in loss and bereavement, and then spent 5 years working with families, helping them through the grief process and connect them to resources so they didn't fall through the cracks.
Right.
And so
Because
all
there's
the
so
work,
much unknown when someone passes, what to do.
it's so that's been the journey. And I took a tragic situation and developed it into, or from learning from what happened. And I feel like, I mean, I'm now 30 years in, where I'm doing lots of grief counseling. I wrote the book.
Right.
I run a grief camp for children, a free grief camp for children. It's a weekend long bereavement camp for kids that honors the memory of the person who died. And I feel like I honor my brother every single day with
It's
the work that I
empowering and
do.
disempowerment. In that moment, it was so disempowering. His life is taken so quickly,
Yeah.
and you've taken it and created something, a movement that is so powerful out of it.
And
That,
which I, yeah,
well,
we
and
all,
that into itself is an incredible gift that you give the world because of it.
yeah, no, and when I work with women, thank you. I should say thank you. I appreciate that. When I work with women who have had a perinatal loss, stillbirth, miscarriage, and then they get pregnant and they're happy, and then
But
they
they
say, "Oh
feel
my
guilty.
gosh, I feel guilty. How can I be happy?" And I say, "Hang on, you're not happy instead of. You're happy because of."
Right.
And that's a very important distinction for anybody who is in a new relationship after the death of a partner, perhaps, or or feeling any happy. You now know how devastating life can be. So for me, every minute of happiness that anyone can have, given the tragic circumstances, and we all know death rate is 100%. That
It's guaranteed.
it's
There's no
guaranteed.
getting away from it. It's just when.
Yeah.
Okay, so what would you say is a good process that you kind of take people through to help them when there has been a sudden death? Because that seems to be like the lead up to someone who's, like I think of cancers often when I think of this, and they're drawn out, or Alzheimer's, or some serious illnesses that take someone away from us over a longer period of time. We have more time to prepare ourselves and to
Mhm.
mentally process this. However, when it comes to short term or very sudden
Yeah.
deaths, when you think about like the mass shootings that we've
Yeah.
seen,
Yeah.
like that is just it. First of all, it's mindless.
Mhm.
It's so pointless. There's nothing behind that. I guess sudden death, really, there is nothing behind it for anybody.
No, 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 no. So can I give you a long answer?
Yes.
I'm going to give you a long answer because this is all part of the TED Talk. So basically, given my experience with families and grief and loss, I developed an acronym to help people understand why they grieve the way they grieve.
Right.
So the acronym I'll say is, it depends on how many scars you have. And
Mm-hmm.
SCARS stands for society. The first S is for society. How does society define the death? Was it a death of an older person of a long-term illness, like a sort of a normative type of loss,
Right.
versus a miscarriage, where the sentiment is you can always have another, so to speak. And so, how society defines that is going to have an impact on how much support you get and how comfortable people are talking about a homicide, a suicide. These are sudden deaths. So if people are not comfortable with it, you're not going to have the same, it's going to affect your grief process, because people are not going to be, it's going to be like this silent experience because people aren't comfortable. So that's number
Right.
one. Number two, the C stands for circumstances. What were the circumstances surrounding the death? Was it a long-term illness or a sudden death? I'm often asked, which is harder, better. I'm like, really? No, it's not
Neither.
a competition. It's not a race. It's not a competition. But they both have different reactions
Right.
and the circumstances in terms of long-term illness. As you mentioned, you have the time to do anticipatory grief, which is knowing, and even though it's always going to be difficult, but
Of course.
there's the preparation that you know that this could happen, might happen. So
Or
you
that it
can
is
have
going to happen and
there's gonna,
you're processing. You
right. So
are
you
processing
get your
over a
affairs
longer
in
period of time.
order. You can say things hopefully that you would not have normally said.
Right.
Sudden death, there's a shock and disbelief that happens, that it's overwhelming and can become complicated because no one was prepared for it.
And there's no closure.
There's
Yeah.
no, yeah. So it's then working with someone and trying to find ways that are meaningful and relevant to them that could help them find. And I'm not even sure I believe in closure. I believe in rituals and honoring the memory, but I'm not sure
Beautiful.
closure I think it could be a bit of a made up thing, even though we use the word all the time, because if it's ongoing and you're just, what it is you're changing your relationship with the person who died. You're not,
Right.
death
You're
ends
not
a life,
ending it.
not a relationship. So if you look at it that way, I'm very involved and interested in how do you maintain a connection to the person. It's not the way it was, but it could be a different way, and that's
Right.
okay. We can talk about that. So that's SC. A is your ancestry. How was death talked about in your family? Was it swept under the rug? Was it suck it up and don't cry, or did you have a space for it? Because I hear from people a lot that say, my dad died 6 months ago, I'm still crying. What's wrong with me?
Right.
What's wrong with you? Why do you think there's something wrong with you? Because the first thing that someone says to me when they start crying is, what do
I
they
don't know.
do? First thing, I'm sorry.
Oh.
People always apologize for crying. I'm like, why are you apologizing for crying?
It's an emotional outlet.
Yeah. So they'll look and say, well, weren't they worth crying over?
Yeah. Right.
Sort of, and then so I'll say to someone or think about, if you're if you're, even if your family's dynamic was suck it up, but that's not who you are, doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. So the next time your family says to you, what's wrong with you? Why are you still crying? Ask them what's wrong with them. Why aren't they?
Or like, it's that should have again, right? You
Yeah.
should be like me.
Oh, that's
I'm
it.
projecting my viewpoint on you. Why aren't you like me? Why are you still crying?
So
Yes. But that's not you.
R, we just talked about the R. You and I talked about it in terms of your dog. It's not about who died, it's about the relationship and the meaning of that relationship to the person or the pet who died. And I sort of went over that story around, if you're closer and life happened to you and significant things happened while your dog was in your life, that dog is going to have far more meaning than other people. And not because you don't love a relative, but not every, just because someone's related to someone doesn't make them that close or that kind of connection. In fact, at camp I run, we don't say the death of a loved one. We say the death of a significant person, because not everybody's a loved one.
Right.
So that's the R. And then the last S is for support. I used to think that just because you had family members, I say, oh yeah, you have family. Yeah, okay, you're good to go. Yeah, no, not so much, right? Family brings out the crisis, brings out the best and the worst in families.
Family has interesting dynamics on any given day, let alone bringing death into it.
Right. So so the support comes in many shapes and sizes. So what kind of support you have does have a significant impact on how you grieve. And support doesn't always mean your family, and may not be the people that you think, but should be or could be people, a good therapist, good friends, an online support group, some literature, or a group in general. I'm a very big group worker, and I believe in the power, especially with grief, of groups. So all of those factors really do play a role in how you're going to grieve. And certainly when there's a sudden death and the circumstances around the death, because let's say it's a death by suicide,
right?
You're not going to get this. You might not get the same kind of support, and you need it. So you need to find places and be proactive about finding places that can give you that support, because it's going to be complicated when there's a sudden death, because you haven't had any of the anticipatory grief or the preparation. to deal with it. And if it's a homicide or a suicide, you're going to be even more alienated, or you might be more alienated from your family or from people, and you become the next you're walking places that people are pointing, they're looking, pointing, or secretly
judging.
You get the judging. Yeah, thank you. Judging, and but nobody's talking.
Right. It just popped into my head too. So in the circumstance of your brother, in the circumstance of the school bus that killed a whole hockey team up here, situations like that where a person is a victim. Okay. Yeah. So the circumstance is victim, right? These are victims, and now the families are victims. Mm-hmm. The forgiveness that is shaped around that. How would you help someone get to the point to forgive the other person? So the person that hit them, the person that, like, I look at the guy and seriously, I'm on the outside, right? I'm not one of the parents of those kids, and both my kids play hockey. So when this came out, it was a really big thing in the hockey community. I still have shivers going through me as I'm saying that. That's so weird. But I remember reading about the driver of that bus, or of the truck that hit the bus.
Right.
And I mean, I feel so horrible for this guy, because this has changed the lives of the families. This has changed his life forever. He has to own and carry these deaths with him. Mm-hmm. That is a horrific, heavy weight to carry.
For sure.
For anybody. Yeah. So again, I'm on the outside. These aren't my kids. So I can look at this and say, I feel for both sides. Yeah. And I could see how it would be so very important to forgive him for what happened. Because again, it's not malice. He was tired.
That's it. Yeah.
Like
you can live your life in anger, and it's not taking away with no disrespect, because it's a horrible, horrible situation by all means. But forgiveness, I believe, is about ourselves and not about the other person.
Oh, I so agree. I just wrote about forgiveness and how it's us harboring an emotion that they no longer hold.
They can't control, because we sit there. I mean, for me, people couldn't believe it. I mean, it was so long ago. It was 31. It's going to be 31 years since my brother was killed. And people said at the time, are you going to go to the trial of but we never wanted to. It was irrelevant. He was irrelevant to us. That wasn't going to change anything except make us feel. So I don't even know if we got charged. I have no idea. And you know what? I really don't care, because that had nothing to do with the fact that it wasn't going to change what happened. No. Maybe that's me. And I'm not saying that these families are not going to, of course, they're not going to feel okay. It's not like I'm okay with what happened. I just choose what's in our control. I choose not to spend my life angry and bitter. I've gotten more angry and bitter.
Holding that pain. Yeah. Or holding that pain. So I literally just wrote about this yesterday, or today it went out. I was writing about forgiveness and what ends up happening. So my story with my father.
Yes.
And that was a tough, there are a lot of things that happened in my life that were really hard to forgive. Mm-hmm. And when something happens to you, so in the case of a mass shooting, right? This is horrible. People die for absolutely no reason other than this person who comes in that is holding on to so much pain that they now have to push it out in the most horrific ways. So I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking, okay, so how do we release this? How do you forgive someone that's done something so wrong to you, right? But really what we're doing is we're holding on to their pain like it's our own. We're angry about it. We resent it. We hurt from it, but we're not allowing ourselves to be us in that, in our experience moving forward in life, the longer we hold it.
Yeah. And how do you teach that to people? Because it can destroy you.
It can destroy you.
And I don't believe, and please don't hear me as saying that it's okay what happened.
Oh, no. No. There's a difference.
Well, we can be fine. No, it's horrible what happened, but I just don't want you as the person, as the griever, to live in that pain and that space, you've already had a horrific thing happen to you.
Why carry it forever?
Yeah.
And perpetuate
you carry
it.
the love. You can
Right.
carry the, and that's why I mean, we have choices. I joke around. I say, I think I said it to you the other day. Would I rather be a real estate agent? Maybe, but this is what happened. This is what happened, and this is what I chose to do with it.
Right.
One of the families I'm dealing with, or working with, who had a terrible, sad, tragic, after a number of failed miscarriages, delivered a beautiful baby, and this baby died eight days later.
Oh,
And
so
there's
sad.
no method or madness or reason or whatever. And I
No.
mean, I won't go into more details except to say that some of the things they're doing now by creating a foundation, and I'm doing a group for male grief because of it, that the foundation is sponsoring that.
Right.
They're doing and purchasing more things for the Children's Hospital. This is not going to bring back their son,
No.
but it
But it
will
honors him.
help honor him.
Yeah, honors him and all the children that follow.
Yeah.
Right. And all the families that's now it's that pebble, right? It's the pebble in the water. It's the afterflow of it all, the ripple effect. It's what we can do through the experience and the gifts that we end up giving because of the experience. It's funny. So I'm thinking about the whole forgiveness thing, and I realized, and I wrote this in my newsletter, I realized with forgiveness, you have to see what's happening. It's not that you're forgiving their behavior. It's not.
No.
It's not that you're excusing it and saying it's okay, because at no point is that what forgiveness is really about. Forgiveness is about recognizing where they're at in that moment. So I recognized where my father was at and what he needed in those moments and what led him up to it, right? So I sent out, and my forgiveness involved giving him love because he was sadly lacking that. Mm-hmm. My forgiveness involved giving him support. And I don't know, I wrote it in the newsletter. There was a whole bunch of things I wrote. But
it's so important what you're saying.
But it was all the things that they were missing in that moment that led them to that. Because, I mean, you think about mass shootings. These people are not okay in that moment to be able to go out and do something like that. It's not really in our nature as much as we can be destructive. It's not really in our nature to go out and, go shoot up.
Very, very disturbed people.
Yes.
Who are very isolated, and it's not ever going to be okay.
It's never going to be okay.
I would love to think that people don't spend their lives punishing themselves. It's almost like a prison
It is a prison. It is absolutely a prison we hold ourselves in. When we hold on to these crazy heavy emotions like that, and anger actually isn't even the lowest emotion, shame and guilt are, but if we're holding on to these emotions for long, long periods of time, it anchors us and drowns us. And what kind of life is that you're now living out in the world because this incident has happened, whatever it may be? Letting go it's a skill set we all need to learn, whether it's a grief, like letting go of that grief, honoring the loss. But learning how to let go is absolutely vital to our existence.
On so many levels, I agree with you. On so many levels of this letting go. And I was fascinated and intrigued. Why do people get stuck in their grief? What makes us get stuck? And I alluded to it earlier, the fact that we are in the event. This event happens and we're there.
Right.
And we want to go maybe move forward into life, but we're afraid. Fear.
Hello, fear.
Hello. Love
I know that one.
So many acronyms. Fantasize experience appearing real, FEAR. Or forget everything and run. There's a lot of them, but whatever is keeping you there. And even if it's not working for you, I suppose it's somewhat working for you, but because that fear is holding you there, because moving forward, not moving on, moving forward, if you understand that you can take your grief, you can take your memories with you, because sometimes I guess we believe or think that if we move forward into life, we're leaving that person behind.
Oh God, no. Like I said, I carry my dog with me all the time.
That's it. So if we can help people understand that you can move forward in, and that's why I said creating a different relationship, so that you don't, well, you're never going to leave that person behind.
They're
Just
always going to be with you.
they're always going to be with you. So you don't have to stay stuck, and you don't have to stay miserable. It doesn't, by the way, it doesn't make you a better griever. Then nobody gets a prize for the best griever.
Oh, I often think about the whole concept around grief. So my mom carries grief still, and she's in her 60s. And for her, her sister died when she was 14. So that's a long time to hold on and not let go.
No.
And it's really
how's that work for her?
To be honest, it's interesting because this is part of the reason why I got into what I do. And this is part of the reason why I talk about all the things that I do, and I talk about emotions, and I talk about how we need to release them and how we need to detach them from the experience, because everything in life is all about meaning to us, right? So when we're little, we're placing meaning on the world because we have no idea what this world means yet. So for a 14-year-old to lose her sister, and the circumstances around that were really weird. My mom had a dream about the car accident. She tried to warn her sister. 3 months later, the accident happens. So she felt absolutely responsible for that death, which is crazy. No one is responsible for a death. Death happens when it happens, the way it does. Mm-hmm. And so she's carried that forever. And I've had many a conversation with my mom about this, and she still sits stuck. I don't know how to unlock this with her. It's tough when it's a family member too, and I have tools, and she doesn't want to take them.
Of course, no, but you can only just have this with a client, a discussion with a client a couple of hours ago. You can only bring a horse to water. You can't make them drink, which, by the way, doesn't mean I'm assuming I'm a carry a little horse. But
but totally true.
Of that. Sometimes we want more for whether it's a client and certainly a family member than they want for themselves. And that's
it's not that they don't want it. It's not that they don't want it. They absolutely want it. They're not ready. They don't know how. They don't know how to let that go. They're afraid.
What is it? Do I let go of the memory? There's something that's why I said, even if it's not working, it's working.
Oh, there's something of value in that. So this actually kind of leads me into the concept around roles. And if I let go of that, I'm no longer a victim, or I'm no longer a this, or I'm no longer a that. Yeah. And I've known this for so long, I wear it as my identity. So then who am I?
So that's part of it. It's and those are why I talked about, don't kid yourself. Everything's related to loss. There's secondary losses, the loss of the role. Loss of being a caregiver, a sibling,
right,
a partner, a parent, which I don't know that we can ever really not be a parent, but we feel like it. So there's all these secondary losses that happen when a death occurs that we don't talk about and we don't address. And they're just as, the death is traumatic, very difficult, but they're just as significant and relevant. Because
they're the many layers, like the onion, right? Yeah. Just understanding that this is part of your moving through.
Yeah. Sometimes people will say, and it comes up very, very often, is that I know that they're devastated about the death, but they don't have a sense of purpose.
Right.
And that's what I hear when they're talking, is like, so now what? This happened and I did this, or I used to do that, and I don't. You have to have something. I think we all need have something to look forward to go forward to go towards. And when you don't have that, that's another loss.
Well, that's our driver in life, right? Is having some purpose that gets you up. I talk about this actually often, is knowing what you want. If you really know what you want, you'll be jumping out of bed at 5 a.m. even when you don't want to get out of bed, right? You're like, yes, but I'm going to go do this. Woohoo! Right? Because you really are focused on what you want. And when a death happens in that case, and we've depended on someone else so much for so much of our purpose, instead of finding it within us and what really drives us and what means something to us and how we get to, I often look at how we bring things to the world, right? Mm-hmm. We're here to do things. We're here to experience life, and we're here to give our experiences, I believe this, we're here to give our experiences in the best way we can to the rest of the world. So your experience with your brother has led you down this path to give the most incredible opportunity for those grieving to be able to help them move through it instead of being stuck in it. That's something that you bring to the world in such an impactful way. I love what you do. Can you tell?
Yes, and can you tell that I love what I do? Like people are like, man, what's wrong with you? Why are you so happy about grief? But I'm happy that when people say, how can you do it, right? And I look at them like, how could I not do it? If you're able to help people, accompany them, and see these magical moments that can really unstick them. And the one client I think of, because she just referred another client to me whose partner died and baby died, and she's married now with kids, and oh my gosh, she would have never believed that. People would have never believed that's, but I know
that's possible.
I believe in resilience of human beings, and I don't know how. I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know, but I know that you can and you will find your way through, because I've met hundreds of people that will. And it may be, because let's talk about time for a minute. How much time does it take? Because that's the other part of my in my TED talk, is that people say, okay, so when am I going to feel normal again? Okay.
First of all, there's a new normal.
That's my term, is that the person that you were is not the person that you are today. And even though that's scary to think, I don't think I'm telling them something they don't know. And so I call it new normals. And so how do you find that way and understand that and know that there still doesn't mean, so in terms of time, it's understanding that time, how much time does it take? Well, time is an interesting concept, I will say.
It's relevant.
It's a full year to experience every birthday, holiday, anniversary, season. Does that mean you're okay after a year? Good to go? No. What it means is you now have the knowledge to know that you can make it through every birthday, holiday, anniversary, or season with tears, with pain. It was hard. People are always anxious around.
Or with beauty, or with appreciation, or whatever it is. Whatever it is.
Every year it's going to change. So just think about grief, which is why we don't get over it. We learn to live with it as a roller coaster.
Right.
Peaks and valleys, times that are more manageable, times that are more difficult. And it changes all the time. So if you expect that and you understand that, you don't think you're going crazy as things are occurring or happening, and why people
or why you feel like you're going backwards.
Yes, because you're not going backwards. It's a dip. It's a valley, because something, and I talk about triggers. Triggers are the unanticipated things that could be a song on the radio, a can of soup at the grocery store, a smell and they bring you right back, and it's as if it just happened. And then you say, well, what's wrong with nothing? You're not going crazy. You're grieving.
Yes. And you experienced a trigger.
Yeah.
And you got to recognize the trigger. Everything is about acknowledging first. I mean, we all know that once we acknowledge something, that's the first step to change, right?
Right.
And then it's understanding that acknowledgement. Okay, so this is a trigger. And I know that if I do these things, I'll be okay with the next and the next and the next time it shows up. Right?
Because I can, and I did make it or find my way through. And so there's people that say, well, the second year was harder than the first. And I can understand that in the respect of, yes, now you know you could make it through, but now you don't get to say, well, last year at this time, da-da-da. Right. It's now over a year. So different years, different times. If I told you that there might be a time that you actually might not remember a birthday or a holiday, not a holiday, but a birthday or anniversary or something like that, I would have never believed it. And I remember my friend calling me a couple of years ago and saying, yeah, I know today's a tough day for you.
And you're like, why?
I'm like, why? What's today? And she goes, your brother's birthday. I'm like, well, it was until you called.
I totally forgot about that.
There are times where it's first and foremost, and I know coming up what it might feel like, but also the anxiety is far worse than anything that ever happens.
Right.
Because it happens what happens. It's what you create in your mind about what might happen or could happen. Why is a birthday? Oh my gosh, a birthday is coming up. I'm really not looking forward to it. Well, why is that day any different than any other day?
And what you just said is really interesting, really, really interesting, because our thoughts take us down paths, right? And they create the response in the body. So as you're talking about anxiety, oh, the birthday's coming up. This is going to be so bad. I'm setting myself up for torture through the body, literally torture through the body, because I'm now flooding myself with a whole bunch of chemicals through my body that make me feel totally crappy, because that's where my thoughts are leading me. And the more I think about it, the more I create it.
Oh yeah, build it, build it, build it,
Build it. Exactly.
And everyone will say, because on the day of, it's, if you check in with anybody, it was what it was. Even
Right.
if it was awful, it was what it was. And now you're talking day after. So
Or you experience something really great on that day by fluke.
right. Yeah, you don't know.
Right? You don't know. You don't know. That's
So
incredible.
it is in our control, very
Mm-hmm.
much so. That's the piece. We can't control the death. We can't control how others around us do or react, but we can control
Or expect us to react or respond or behave. But you can be you and
like I
allow
said,
things to be.
I love this "you do you." I love that. I wasn't so familiar with that expression, and this summer, a lot of the staff I worked with used it. I said, "It's great. It's so true. You do you." You know,
Just,
everyone look.
yeah, just be you. Be you and know who you is, right? This is the biggest thing. Most people have so many influences laid on them and haven't recognized those yet. I talked about that when I talked about belief systems. And our belief systems are literally just the influences we've taken through multiple sources in our life, right? So my beliefs, I talked about this actually in the sex series, what we bring into the bedroom and belief systems are crazy. They're crazy. But it's the same thing with all things in life. Our influences dictate what we think we should behave like, act like, move forward like, and that's not us. That's
No.
the influence. That's the layer. That's the veil, the perception, the lens we are now wearing and looking at the world through. So figuring out who you are is, I think that's one of the biggest gifts I got through that death of, like Annabelle's death. There were so many lessons I learned through the death of my dog, which was honestly mind blowing to me. But part of it was figuring out who I was. And that as much as I sat there and said, oh, I could have been better this, I could have done that. Yes, we can always be better. But in that moment, I gave her the best I could in those moments. And honestly, she lived a really good life.
There you go. Yeah.
So then in the end, I went, I gave what I could in those moments and I can be proud of that. There's nothing to regret. And regrets, oh.
I hate regret. I
don't believe in it either. I'm like, I will go to my death with zero regret. I have zero regret now. And I've done some crazy things in my life, but I now recognize that they were all perpetuated. All my actions were perpetuated by belief systems that I wasn't really aware of at the time. And therefore you are how you are in the moment based on the belief systems you carry.
Exactly. And if some people listening don't necessarily believe that they can change their belief systems, a real easy way to prove it, and I hope I'm not destroying this for anybody, but for all of you who grew up in the, in the late, anywhere, as kids, did you believe in the tooth fairy?
Right. Did you believe in Santa?
So I really hope I'm not ruining this for anybody.
The Easter Bunny.
Yeah, Easter Bunny. And then you did. And then you didn't.
That's right. Well, honestly, there's a million belief systems that we take on. And then at some point, some shift because we're like, that's just stupid. Right? Yeah. Or some that are really heavily ingrained that we come to understand later. Again, starts with awareness and then moves from there. But then we come to understand this does not serve me. Right? Yeah. Me carrying all those emotions with my experiences as a kid, those weren't serving me. They were holding me back in every way possible. I played so small and hid like a little ball. How is that serving anyone? Certainly doesn't serve me. That's not great for me. That's not about me. And then it wasn't actually me doing anything out in the world either, because even when I was in finance and I knew I'm sitting across the table from someone and I carry a ton of knowledge that will benefit them and make their lives so much better, and I'm letting them walk out of the office without doing anything. Why? Right?
So why? Because of your belief?
Because but I shouldn't. They get to make this choice. They do, They do get to make this choice. But there's also that point where you just kind of like, you could say something else. You could give them that last little nudge that
Yeah.
sometimes that's what people need. They need that nudge. They need to know that you're confident enough because you know yourself and you know your values, but they need to know that you really are the expert and you really can lead them when they need you. Because that's what we're here for. We're here to actually really give to everybody else around us. When we're in wholeness, that's what we do. And when we're in grief, we're lacking that because we're feeling like something is so missing. We're disconnected, right?
Yeah, and we need that. We all need to be, as we started earlier, we all need to feel that connection.
Mm-hmm.
So we can be disconnected, but we doesn't mean we have to stay there.
Nope. And the longer we stay in isolation and disconnected, the further away from ourselves we get. This is what I find. The more disconnected, and I'm human. I have lots of tools and I've had a lot of experience that has led me down a path to enlightenment of different levels. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes I drop back into human, in such big, heavy, crazy ways.
Yeah.
And then other times, so far outside of that. But we experience these ups and downs and backs and forths because we get disconnected from self, knowing who we are, why we're here, what we really want to do, the meaning for us in life, what's meaningful to us, and how we want to give that. Because ultimately, when we're whole, we give unconditionally. We can't help it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about being a giver. It's overflowing. You just can't help it. It's like what you do. You can't help it. This is just what you do because this is your gift to the world and you can't help but give it. Just like what I do when I work with people in fear, because I look at the primitive brain from a very interesting standpoint. Yeah. Oh, the hijacks.
Yeah.
And
oh gosh, yeah.
Right? The hijacks. So good.
We convince ourselves in or out of anything. Hey, we're really good.
Oh my God, it's so true. I believe this until I don't. Yeah. Or this can be like this, or not.
Right. So
on any given day. Yes. Belief systems, that's the interesting thing about belief systems too, is they literally will like ebb and flow. Like I can believe this and then completely disregard it and then kind of come back and question it again. And then yes or no. Usually when a belief system is shifting, it'll be very much from the standpoint of, I look at it from the standpoint of, does this serve? But how is this working? Mm-hmm. Is this working for me? Mm-hmm. No, mm-hmm. It's not really. But okay, so I'm going to make these changes, but then it's my belief system. So I get sucked back in because it's my norm and it's what I know.
And it's when comfortable, right?
Yep. And we were talking about that there's still something there that it's giving you.
Yeah.
Right.
I do believe that. I believe there's somehow, even in its dysfunctional form, it's serving you.
Absolutely. We do things dysfunctionally all the time.
Because I'm comfortable and I'm used to it. And so this is what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. But it doesn't serve us at all.
We've gotten so comfortable in our discomfort that we're okay in that space instead of making the change. And that's the same thing, right? With the letting go. Because all this ties in, grief or not, being able to let go and move forward means we have to get uncomfortable in a new way. And talking about growing, you're not the same person after a loss, but you're not the same person when you strive for something big either. So I set a goal and I'm never going to be me right now in that goal. I have to grow into that goal or I would have already achieved it.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So it's the same thing when we go through any experiences in life that alter us, that shape us, that change us. We are always becoming the next layer of ourselves.
So recognizing that that's what I meant about non-death losses. In order to do that, we're moving, which means we're letting go of or giving up something or changing something. And that's where the resistance comes in.
Letting go of, just thinking about that when we're in the midst of changing. Okay. So whether it's grief, whether it's non-death grief, I'm letting go of this job. I'm letting go of this career. My kids are moving out of the house.
Yeah.
When we let go, we're creating space for the next thing that's going to come in and allow us to be the next level of ourselves, the better, the next level up of us. And I think that that's such an incredible opportunity, instead of always seeing it from the loss,
That's
but
right.
I'm losing this. Okay, so I'm now in a breakup and it's messy and I feel so sad because they're gone. But if you look at the other side, so I had the most crazy experience with this. Have this breakup. It's really anticipated, the breakup, right? Doesn't make it easy.
Well,
Does not make it easy, but it's anticipated. I basically gave an ultimatum and said, look, I love myself enough to know that this is what's acceptable and this is what's not. You can choose, but this is where I'm at. And 2 weeks later, we were broke. Like, we were done.
yeah.
But in the beginning, it felt like there were so many things going through, right? Lots of emotions that you're dealing with.
Sure.
And then a month and a half later, 2 months, a month and a half later, I go on this date and we're in an airplane. So he's a pilot and he owns a plane. And we go up and I have this realization while I'm up there. I will say flying is absolutely spectacular in a 2-seater plane. Like, it's it's like meditation for me. It's so great. I will actually probably get licensed in my life. But anyways, we're up there and I have this realization. I'm like, had that breakup or that loss not happened, I wouldn't have had the space to even allow this experience, which I am giddy. I'm like a 5-year-old kid up here. I'm so excited and the smile won't come off my face. It actually hurts. I've been smiling for so long, and I never would have experienced it had I not had the space to say yes, because I took the time to let go of what wasn't okay anymore. Right? And it's the same thing. Grieving can hold us in that space where we don't allow the great opportunities of life to enter in.
Well, that's number one for sure. It's very well said. It is a choice that we make. I do want to say it's very important that everybody does allow themselves to grieve.
Yes.
Avoidance is
not very.
Love avoidance. Isn't that good, right? So it works so well
until it doesn't, and then it's blown up because it's just like compressed gas.
So exactly, the pressure cooker. So we need to allow ourselves that time to grieve and to feel, because what is it? Pain is inevitable, but suffering is not.
Right.
So if I'm going to tell you that putting your hand on the stove is going to give you pain, you're not going to do it. I understand that. So because we avoid pain, so we don't want to think about it. We don't want to do the grief work. So we try and avoid it, but it comes back, and hence many years later, multiple losses, et cetera, that's where what will come out.
Ooh, the compounded effect
is when you allow yourself to do your grief work and feel the pain, then you open yourself up for a space then to say, forget the guilt. Now you don't have to have guilt. I mourned the loss. I will always mourn this loss. But that doesn't mean I don't have space for wonderful and new adventures.
Right. And for life to continue. Because that's a thing about death that I found with her, was that life carries on. Regardless of how you feel, life still moves on.
Like you said, you walked outside and everybody after your
was
dog
still moving.
Didn't the world, you wanted it to be like frozen.
Yes.
But that's what should have happened. And I always tell that to families all the time. Look outside, the world is still going on. I know for you it's stopped, but this is because if it stopped for everybody, everything would stop. Right. So I know that that's hard, and it's kind of where it's almost like that, that wheel, and it's going in a park, and like, how do I jump on?
What is that thing called? The merry-go-round.
Merry-go-round?
Yeah.
How do I jump? When do I jump on? But you got to, at some point, you got to jump on.
That's right.
You're missing everything. Everything is going to just go by.
And making the choice. It is absolutely a conscious choice. So I had a car accident years and years ago, and this is kind of all relevant about getting stuck in things. So I have this car accident, and you're reliving it all the time because you're seeing doctor after doctor after doctor. It was horrible. And then you go into, like, it's a natural state to go into a depression from an experience like that, where you're constantly reliving. Because again, you're setting your brain in motion to continuously perpetuate a chemical cycle through your body, as well as the injury. It's fascinating, actually. But at some point, I literally went, I can't do this anymore. I can't see these doctors all the time anymore. I have to slow this down. I have to start living. Because it was a loss of the life I was living before. And many people experience, I never thought of this as loss, but it is true. many people experience massive altering, physical altering experiences. And that is, your life is changed.
Yeah.
It ain't the same no more. And there's an acceptance that comes with that. But there's also a point where you go, I need to get up, take that first step, and move forward. Whether it's the loss of a relationship, the loss of a person, the loss of a career, any of these things.
Yeah. Well, I define myself good, better, and different very much by my work. And I had an experience where it's funny at the time, I think about it now, it was about 10 years ago or a little less than 10 years ago, where I loved my job and I was laid off. I was actually, they eliminated my position. I was like, what? I was only there for a few years, but I just didn't see it coming. And people would think that's horrible. A grief counselor. I mean, I always sort of did grief counseling on the side, but I had other positions and I just loved the job. And I was so devastated by it. And I was so hurt that this happened. And it was a really difficult time for me because my work was so important to me.
Right.
And I will talk about forgiveness. I have gone to people that were responsible or part of, because everything in my life that has been incredible happened after that job. Everything, bar none.
Opening up the space.
Because I don't think I would have left.
So
they kind of chose for me. And
sometimes life pushes you in the right direction.
Yeah, I believe that for sure.
Regardless of how resistant we are, right? We get so comfortable and it's such a great job. I love it. It pays me well. However, when you're doing something that you really love, that's awesome because that's great alignment.
Yeah.
But I think there's something to be said about recognizing that when something crazy happens, it's bad in our from our view, it's bad, right? You lost your job. This relationship breaks up. This person has now died. There's a loss here.
Yeah.
We just see it from the point of lacking instead of what's on the other side of this? What's coming?
Yeah. And right? I don't want to, by the way, I don't think it helps, for me anyway, for people to say door closes, door. No. I didn't need the platitudes. I just needed to know, and that this was a hiccup, and that I have an opportunity now.
Yeah.
To really develop my private practice and this and that. And the things that have happened in my life since then are incredible. I've literally gone to people from that agency and said, thank you.
That's so funny because I have done that with past relationships. I've done that with numerous different things where I've been like, thank you so much for the opportunities that you gave me by letting me go.
Yeah. So it's how do we, our perspective and who are we and how do we see these things, maybe not straight away, right away, but at some point as opportunities, as new chapters,
because they are, life continues, right? And I think too, from the view of death, I don't know, I look at it this way too. Would this person want me to sit here in misery, anchored in these guilty, regretful feelings, or would they want me to live my life here? You know what I mean? There's that side too.
Everyone has their own way of their journey of how it is, and so whether someone would or wouldn't, I suspect nobody would want somebody. I'd like to believe.
I would like to believe that too.
Would want that, but if, and I've said this a number of times, if lying in your bed, curled up in a ball with your head under the covers was going to bring them back or make it better, I'd tell you I tell everybody to do it.
Right.
But you need your time. And I'm not saying that we all have those moments in time and what some people call them pity parties, whatever you want to call them, but just
allow it.
Whatever, allow it, lean into it. But at the same time, nothing changes if nothing changes.
One of the best gifts I gave myself was in a breakup. It was really hard to have this breakup. And when it happened, I literally said to myself, I'm going to be open to this. I'm going to allow it to be everything it needs to be in this moment, regardless of how messy, how horrible, how whatever. I'm
Yeah.
just going to allow all of it to flow through, all of
Yeah.
it. And then on Monday or whatever, I'm going to pick myself up and start moving. I gave myself a deadline. Sounds kind of crazy that I gave myself a deadline
No,
for
I think
morning.
it's great. It's cool. No, but deadline for part of it anyway.
Right.
More,
Right.
but it won't be the
Because
same.
it's part of the process.
Yeah.
But I will say there was such an incredible gift in that, because I was a complete mess, allowed myself to be the complete mess in that moment. And I had some great support around me. I went over and saw some friends. And then by Monday, I literally felt very different, because emotions are crazy what they do inside the body. Like when we cry, it's such an incredible release of something so heavy for us. So being allowed to cry to the point of like completely swollen eyes, wearing ice packs, completely ridiculous, right? Super, super messy, but allowing that to flow through instead of get stuck allows you to process things a little bit quicker within your own space and get up and move.
Permission.
Yes.
Grief affects us holistically. It affects us, our thoughts, our body, our feelings,
our spirit.
Yeah. So when we deny it, denial is another Coreyism. Didn't even know I am lying.
Oh my God, I love that. That is so good. Didn't even know I was lying.
Yeah. So we it has to go somewhere.
Right.
So a big part of my work is normalizing, generalizing, and of course validating someone's experience.
Yep.
But helping them move slowly. And if someone, I've had clients that for sure that want to stay stuck, and you know what?
Right.
So good. Like, what can I tell you? That's it. That's where you want to be. I can call it what I see. Whatever. Okay. But that's where, so there's only so much I can do with you. Even a client that wasn't a death, but it was just sort of a loss of direction. Yeah. And they said, well, why should I bother trying? I'm only going to fail. And I'm like, okay, well, I can't work with you. And they're like, what? And I said, well, you've already decided you're going to fail. So there's nowhere for me to go from that. There's no work here to be done. And she thought about it, and I said, you're right. You might fail.
You're always right, though.
But you might not. I don't know. So, but if you've already decided, then you have failed. Essentially, you're right. So she thought about it, and we worked together. And this woman now lives in another country. She bought me a book, Life is Good, because she opened herself up to moving forward and not staying stuck.
And she started to question, why do I believe that? Why do I believe that I'm going to fail? What if you don't? Why would you automatically go to, I'm going to fail?
Yes. I think that was the fear of success.
Yeah. Which is actually big for a lot of people. It's not so much the fear of failure, it's the fear of success, I find more often than not.
Well, what if it doesn't work? What if it works? People are afraid of, we talked about control, but we also didn't use the word, they want certainties.
Right.
And if something is uncertain, I'm going to stay where I am because I know this crappy job. I know this crappy relationship.
Yep.
So I might not like it, but it doesn't help us better the devil.
But it's safe. But it's safe.
With every change comes risk.
Yes. Our willingness to take the step. And it's courage. It's not like, I look at fear from a very interesting standpoint. I don't think we're ever fearless. I think we have moments when we have no fear because it's not a situation that puts us in fear. Right? Okay. Like, you get up and you talk on stage. Are you afraid every time you talk on stage?
There's adrenaline, but not obviously not incapacitating fear.
Right. So for me, when I get, actually, that's a funny story. But for me, there's a little bit of fear, because that's it's all of our built-ins.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, mine has existed in a different space for me, and I'm still working through that space sometimes. But I'm much more aware, so it makes it a lot easier to deal with. However, I do believe that we move into fearful situations with courage. We are willing to acknowledge that what's on the other side of that fear is greatness. And that's in whatever choices we make in our life. The greatness of, like, the other side of the loss, opening up to the space of what's coming.
coming, which is terrifying.
It is terrifying.
I don't know what my life is going to be like without that person, without that that partner,
Job,
that child,
without. Yep.
So it's terrifying. Let's call okay, but it's not impossible.
Oh God, no. And it's really exciting once you take the first step and something happens, and the second step and something happens, and then you're like, oh my God, this is so awesome. It's so awesome. It often reminds me. So I was in this event, like, I don't know, probably 5 years ago. And we do this fear exercise, and it's an arrow on your throat. Okay. You break the arrow. It's great. Yeah. It's great fear exercise. So I remember looking at the facilitator saying, so I just step forward, and she says, yep. And I'm like, okay. And I step forward, and you feel the pinch in your, like, the soft part of your throat. And you're like, ow, that hurts. Oh, that's not bad. And this is the process, right? And this is all things in life when we take that risk.
Right.
Oh, that hurts. Oh, actually, that's not, it's okay. Oh my God, it's Boeing. Oh, it just broke. It just broke. Holy shit, I just did that.
It's right? Really adrenaline. Was that with someone facing you, or you?
Nope. You're up, like, the one side of the arrow is up against the wall, and the other side is up, like, on you.
I've done the metal bar. I've done it between myself and the facilitator, literally a 3/4 inch metal bar. Literally looked at each other and walked, so bent that bar, walked on fire.
So crazy, hey?
I did that and went and quit my job.
Because you realize the fears that we face are really not what we think they are. We make them into these incredible ideas and images, just like we do death. But I can't live without them. My world means nothing without them. Your world means everything.
Yeah.
They were just a part of it, right?
And I'm not going to make it through the funeral. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. I'm not going to make it. Yeah, you will. Why? Because you might need medication. You might need support. You might even need a wheelchair because you can't walk. I don't know. It depends on the person. But I've seen enough people to know that you can, and you will. Yeah. And it will be whatever it'll be. But you will. But
that's one of the things with isolation too, when you think about it. But it's different for me, right? People are like, but that's not me. It's different for me. This is different because it's me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's good for your. Yeah, maybe that works, but not. You're right.
Yeah. So often you hear that, but I'm different.
Yeah.
Like, but, and that's where support groups can be really, really effective for people working through grief.
For sure, because even if in those groups you might hear a little bit of I know how you feel, and I'm more okay with it because you're either in a widow support group or women who've had perinatal loss or stillbirth. I've done groups for caregivers. I'm doing a male grief group now, and it's so powerful. But it's putting yourself in the environment of other people who help you normalize your experience, because you really this is only me. And no, it looks a little different because of the scars.
Of course, right?
It's a little different, but there's a similarity and a support that really helps you. So, I can give you an example of a woman in a group who said to me, I don't like to go get my hair done. And the other women were, why? And she said, because I have no one in the house to say you look nice.
Oh.
And everybody in the group went, oh, whereas out of that group, people most likely would have said, oh, just call me. They don't get it the same way.
Right. And there's a connectedness too. As soon as we realize we are not the only ones who've experienced this. And I mean, rationally, from a logical standpoint, again, this is like what part of your brain is functioning at this time. But from a logical standpoint, you're like, of course people have experienced death before, or of course people have lost a child before, or of course. But when we're in it, we don't think like that. So it's really, I think there's a lot of power in community, regardless of what you're moving through. There's something to be said about being connected with others, because it allows us to be connected with ourselves and know that we're not alone.
Right.
We're never alone. And then that just brings me to quantum entanglement. Makes me think we're never alone. But we aren't. Oh, Corey, I could talk to you for days.
It's a pleasure.
It has been such an incredible pleasure to have you on the podcast and to just really be able to kind of flesh out some ideas around grief, loss, things I hadn't really thought of as loss, and how we manage those. And then some ideas on, seeking out support groups, or doing what we need to, or putting a timeline on something, allowing yourself to really be submersed in the experience in the moment, have the support around you, and just allow it to be what it has to be in that moment. It's honestly us in our vulnerability, and us in these moments are us being so strong in moments of weakness.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think back, I was a complete mess and a disaster. That was like one of my lowest, weakest points, but it was also one of my strongest points, allowing myself to do it.
Do it and know that you can and will find your way through, which is something I say all the time. So I do say that ultimately the grief experience is the journey that we all go on, and you will heal, but the scar will always be there. And the more profound the scar, or the more pronounced the scar, the more profound the loss.
And you know what? Those scars are beautiful. Yeah. They shape us into the incredible beings we are. Yes, life experiences are honestly gifts, regardless of how we perceive them in the moment. Yeah. Oh, Corey.
Thank you.
Okay, so tell me, what are you up to right now? What would you like to leave the listeners with?
Oh gosh, anybody interested in more about a bit about around the grief process, etc. I have a book called Someone Died, Now What? A personal and professional perspective on grief and loss. That's on Amazon. I will have a TEDx talk coming out, which defines the loss and found, how to create new normals, which talks about the scars and how to move, finding new normals or creating new normals after someone you love dies. And anyone who's in the Montreal area and knows a family who has had a death in the family, could be anytime, any kind of loss of anyone in the family, we do offer a free weekend-long grief support group. If someone can bring a family to Montreal, we're happy to house them. The camp's going to be from August 7th to the 9th. And of 2020, and love to hear from you. You can look that up. Just Google me, Corey, at CoreySirota.com.
And I'll have all your links and stuff in the show notes anyways. And I already mentioned the name of your book because I think it's fantastic. Everyone should read this. It's such a powerful, powerful tool to have, to know how to let go and move through and not get stuck in any area in our life. Thank you for the gift that you bring this world. And thank you to your brother for the gift that he is now given in a different way. Yes.
I love it. I appreciate that so much. You are wonderful. Keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. All right, Corey. Thank you so much. What amazing gifts she has just given you. The tools, the insights, all of her wisdom and knowledge. Thank you so much, Corey. And you, my beautiful peeps, you, my beautiful souls, I want to invite you to fearitgoes.com. That's right. Come leave comments. Come subscribe to the podcast if you're loving this, because there's so much great details that I always want to give you. Come subscribe. Come leave a 5-star. Yes, we love 5 stars. And if it's less than 5 stars, please write me and let me know why. I always want to improve. So I want to bring you the best that I possibly can and what's going to be valuable to you. So if I'm not hitting the mark, send me a note. It's the only way I can improve, is to hear what it is that you guys are really seeking out, or what you really want that's going to feed your soul. Now, you can check us out at fearitgoes.com. Go to the podcast page, leave comments there. If you are ready to take a stand in your life and ready to take the journey into self, to really become your authentic self and live your fullest life, come to Fear It Goes and send me a message. I'd love to help you. This is what lights me up inside. I will bring you every tool I have available to me, and those that I'm always learning. So I will always be adapting to what is going to work best for you. Until next week, my beautiful souls, have an absolutely extraordinary week and choose to be the exception to the rule.